Okay, hello guys. I'm gonna just start off by showing off my in-game settings first, as I'm sure that's what most people are coming here for. Most of these settings I just have off due to quality of life. Reloading interrupts ADS. I'm not a huge fan of that. Don't want to like cancel my reloading. I'd like to be able to do both at the same time, so I leave this off. Um, Hit color effect. Everything else is kind of personal preference, looting, whatnot. These settings aren't even that very important, to be quite honest with you. These are my current mouse settings. None of these settings down here I have changed at all. The only settings I have changed here are my mouse sensitivity, which I play at 60 centimeters. And I also have my independent offset optic control changed as well. So what this does when you have it on dedicated keybind, you know the laser sight that you get that aims you down the side of your gun? I don't have that as an option, so I only have my sights, which it can change to. It just saves me an extra click when I'm trying to transition between sights, and I just kind of prefer it. I can show you the difference with it on and off right now. Okay, so right now I have the default setting on for whenever you're ADS and wanting to change optics, which is toggle with switch optic. This is the default keybind, which it would normally be. Which this normally when you have a sight and a laser, it would be 4 different clicks with the cheater scope because there's a 1.5x, a 3x, a 7x, and then this sight, or the laser sight, sorry. Which this is the sight that I'm not a huge fan of. I feel like this right here, personally, I think it makes me a lot more inaccurate rather than when I could be in 1.5x or even 1x. And I just am not a huge fan of this at all. So when I have this setting turned off, I'm then able to ADS my gun, and I'm able to swap between 1, 3, and 7 without having my laser optic ever interrupting me. I just personally prefer this as an option. This is probably one of the settings that I always would tell somebody to enable, as I think the laser optic is extremely inaccurate. Okay, and back to the rest of my settings. Once again, I have this set to dedicated. It is just so that my laser optic is turned off, and I have my mouse sensitivity changed. Nothing else inside of my settings for my keyboard and mouse is changed at all. For my controls in combat, I have just basic keybinds. Nothing here is super important except for jump, mantle, ascend, and then jump and ascend only. For these two keybinds, uh, if I have a clip of it, I'll throw it in right now. If I don't, I'm sorry. But so I have my mouse scroll wheel down for jump and mantle. So when I'm doing this, I can mantle onto different objects. Like I should be able to mantle on top of this. Okay, well I can't do it because we're in firing range. But it would allow me to mantle onto this. And then I have my spacebar is jump only. So when I'm trying to jump onto something, or rather jump over something to shoot somebody, it won't mantle me on top of objects. Compared to when I need to mantle something, I can just scroll wheel and then it'll mantle me over top of an object. But the point in those two is, so when I'm jump shooting somebody over an object, I don't accidentally mantle into it if I hit W, which can kind of be annoying, and it's gotten me killed a few times, which is why I've decided to change that setting. And I think it's pretty important to have, especially if like you're going for like an aggressive jump shotting them over something. Other than my jump and mantle keybind, I have my mouse lean or my mouse buttons as my leans. So I have a forward and a back mouse bind or a mouse button, sorry, which allows me to just quickly lean rather than Q and E. I personally think that Q and E is a lot worse for having your lean keybind set to compared to having mouse wheels, or sorry, compared to having mouse buttons. I find it like it's a lot easier to like quick peek somebody using a mouse button and then A or D, but it's also a personal preference thing. I do have my mouse leans, or sorry, I do have my leans set to mouse buttons just due to personal preference. I've had it like this ever since I played Rainbow Six Siege, and I've kind of kept it that way as it's just a personal preference. Silent mode, which is your slow walk, I have that set to alt. Auto run, I have it as caps lock. Those are all just personal preference. All of my keybinds here, I'll just quickly scroll through them. All of these, for the most part, are personal preference. The only other keybind that I would say that is useful would be rangefinder, which is specifically useful on the site here. This referred to as a cheater scope. When you use a scope and you range find with it, it'll normally pop up above the player's head, even if like you can't really see them, like through trees, through bushes, everything. It'll pop up the player's name, their HP, and it'll show you where they are, and it'll show you how much drop it is that like you need in order to connect a bullet to somebody. This scope is honestly one of the best scopes in the game, and I really do love this scope. I just haven't been using it as of recently because there's 2x scopes in the game, and I think they look beautiful. Other than range find and the jump button, all of these are preference binds. And for my screen and interact, there's nothing special here. All my settings basically are default. I'll just quickly scroll through them. Vehicle doesn't really affect operations, but if you're curious, I'll just quickly scroll through these as well. I don't play controllers, so I'll just go ahead and skip over that. For my screen, I have show player name on, and I also have performance parameters. So this right here, it allows me to see at the top of my my top right of my screen, like my FPS and whatnot. It's nothing too important, but I do like to have it on. The rest of these settings don't really matter all that much if I'm being honest. Closed backpack, this one, it's so if I'm in a body and I'm trying to like grab a quick armor out of something and I get shot by like an AI or even like a player, it doesn't pull me out of the box when I'm trying to swap or if I'm looting. I would much rather prefer to manually get out of things rather than the game taking me out of it and then me accidentally trying to get out of the said box and then clicking tab and opening my inventory again. For my graphic settings, I'll just slowly go through these and explain a few of them. My sharpness, it's kind of just a preference thing. I really do like having my game super sharpened. VSync, this just matches your refresh rate to your monitor, but it's been said to mess with some things like it'll hurt your frame sometimes or like other things. So I just have this off in every game I play. I've always been told that VSync is just bad, so I've never kept it on. I'll show my brightness setting. This is also preference based on my monitor, so this might be a little bit different for you guys depending on the monitor that it is that you guys have. So just keep that in mind when you're changing that setting. I do not use fast sync. It's another thing for FPS, but I don't think it gives me anything bonus. My current FOV that I play is 110. It is just a personal preference upon the FOV. I find that the 110 FOV is a perfect balance between low FOV and high FOV. I find it as a nice balance between the two because at a high FOV, you're able to see a lot more around you, which is obviously your field of view, which is what FOV stands for. But at a lower FOV, you're able to see a lot smaller targets, a lot bigger, if that makes sense. I'll go into the firing range real quick and just show you guys exactly what it is that I'm talking about. So starting out on this is a 60 FOV. You see how big the target is. I'll make sure to put up side-by-side pictures after I'm done with this as well, just so you guys are able to see. And so if I put my FOV on 120, you will then see just how zoomed out the body of the character actually is. It seems to be a lot smaller of a target compared to me being on a FOV of 60 or even 90. And I tend to find 110 being a perfect balance between these two as it makes smaller targets. It's just slightly bigger, but it also gives me advantages of having a higher FOV. Okay, and with the rest of my settings, these two are personal preference. I have my graphic settings on custom as a lot of my settings are either low or on high for specific reasons. I have my game optimized to be basically as welly optimized for FPS as possible. So I have most of my settings on off or low, as most of them really do highly impact your game. Particles, I believe, is what affects the waterfall in Zero Dam. So if you've ever loaded into Zero Dam and see the water just flying out, it's probably because of your particles. I believe it is the particle setting which does that, but it also does affect grenades, smokes, and whatnot. I have all of these turned to low or off as they do heavily affect your FPS. My render scaling, you can only change this if you cut off DLSS, I believe, but I play with DLSS on. Anyway, I have it set to 100. My depth of field, I have that as off. I have global illumination, quality, shaders, both on low. But I have my textures on ultimate. I find textures to be just a small detail to make the game a little bit more pretty so it doesn't look super plasticky. But it also does help with like the characters looking normal instead of looking like Doritos. I have my streaming on low, but I have my shadows on ultra. The reason I have my shadows on ultra rather than being low is because when you have your shadows turned up just slightly, which I believe ultra is the perfect one to keep your FPS at like a normal rate, When you have your shadows on ultra, sometimes it does help you with getting a kill. Like maybe there's somebody around a wall that's standing like in front of a light, which will show them your shadow, and you're able to get a pre-fire kill off of them. It's just it's just like little cheeky settings, and it's not like super common that something like that will happen, but there is always a situation where it could happen. So I like to keep it on ultra. Um, all my other settings, I have these all on low. I have my super resolution mode on DLSS. The reason I have this on DLSS instead of off is because of the FPS difference. I do not get an insane amount of FPS when I play this game. Most of the time, I'm sitting below 120, especially when I'm streaming. So having DLSS on definitely does help me. If you have it as off though, your game will be a lot less blurry, as DLSS definitely does blur your screen as it is trying to generate you more frames. But I do have this on quality to help the most that it can, so then my game isn't super like blurry. I have frame generation off. I'm not a huge fan of frame generation, to be quite honest with you. I don't think it looks that much better, and I believe it's just like basically fake FPS. By fake FPS, I mean like I can't really notice it. I have reflex low latency off, as I was told that this also can affect your FPS, so I'm just going to cut that off as I don't want any sort of thing that would affect my FPS and make it even lower than it already is. My audio. I have my master volume on 100. My preference for audio is object-based binaural audio. I've tried playing between all three of these, like just giving it a try even when this dropped, just to see what it is that I truly do like. Object-based binaural is definitely my favorite audio without a doubt. Mute and minimize, that's just a preference. So like when I'm just tabbed out, I can't hear anything. Um, my music volume, I hate hearing the music volume, especially like when I'm in the black site. It's just kind of annoying, so I have that turned off. Sound effects, this is like everything that happens in games, so gunshots, grenades, whatever you can imagine, footsteps. That's what all of this is determined by. UI, this is like when you're in your inventory or you open up a box, any of that, it just makes audio. I don't like having it too loud, but I also don't like having it too low. I just like hearing the noise, so I have that on. Voice volume, I feel like this doesn't really affect anything. Like I've noticed that my teammates are still pretty damn loud, like in game, but I was told that this is supposed to be what affects your teammates' volume, which is why I have them at 3.6. But still, again, sometimes my teammates are still extremely loud. Copyrighted music playback, this is for different flag missions or like even just anywhere in the world. There are certain places where you have copyrighted music, and I'm not a huge fan of that, so I have it turned off. I have my push to talk as N. I have my mic volume at 100 because I manually changed my mic so it shouldn't be too loud in game. And then I obviously have my microphone set as my microphone. This last tab, it doesn't really matter all that much. It's just kind of personal thing. I have show player history on because I don't really care if people look at my player history. Show leaderboard information, that doesn't bother me either. All this is just personal preference. Nothing will really truly impact you. Okay, and for my Nvidia filters, I know a lot of people have been very curious to know what the Nvidia filters are that I play on, so I'll just quickly go over them. I have my sharpen at, or well, rather, the settings that I have on are both detailed and color. These are just the two that I chose as they seem to be the best fit for what it is I was looking for out of this game. I have my sharpen at 61. I have my clarity at 44. I have HDR tuning at 48, and I have bloom at 0. For my color, I have my tint color at 0. If you turn this up, it'll change depending on your intensity, which would make it brown, or sorry, orange or blue, depending on what it is that you like. I don't like either of those. My temperature, I have it as 6. I feel like this brings out a lot more orange in targets. Like if you notice when you aim at a player in game, they tend to be orange. So I find 6 to be that like little push that makes oranges stand out a little bit more. So it might catch something out of the corner of my eye, or a guy that's just running a bush somewhere that I wouldn't be able to see normally on normal settings because they might be gray instead of being orange. And then I also have my vibrance turned up to help this. Sometimes I'll turn this up a little bit more or even down. It just really depends on how I'm feeling. But for right now, I've had it at 64. Okay, and that is all of my in-game settings. I will also go over a few of my other settings like my Nvidia control panel, and I will also go over settings for my audio EQs, which I use for my headset. Okay, so for starting off with my Nvidia control panel, I like to have my brightness just turned up just slightly. I don't really touch my contrast, sorry, or my gamma. I do really like digital vibrance. It definitely is a big difference between having your game looking very gray or having your game very colorful. I love having my game colorful personally. But I also have my hue turned up. This doesn't really like matter. It's the same as it being on 0 as it is 359. I just change it because I was bored to be honest. But there's no difference between 360 or sorry 359 and 0. They're both the exact same thing. For my other settings, which would be adjust desktop size and position, I play a stretched resolution of 1920 by 1440. It is just my preferred resolution to play on, which is the same as playing 4:3, which for those of you who are on 1080p or otherwise known as 1K, it would be the same as 1080 by 1440. But once again, it's just a preferred resolution, which is 4:3 aspect ratio, which I just prefer to play myself. If you do want to play stretch res, make sure in this setting here you have it as full screen. If you do not have it as full screen, you will have black bars on the side of your screen or on the top of your screen, but there will be black bars unless you have this set to full screen. And then here for change resolution, if you do want to come and change your resolution to being stretched, you just would simply come here, you'd click customize, enable resolutions not exposed by display, click create resolution, and then whatever resolution it is that you want to play in, you can change it to. Just make sure your refresh rate is the highest that it can be for your monitor, otherwise you'll be just bottlenecking your frames for no reason at all. Okay, and that should be the end of my Nvidia control panel settings. I'll go on to now show you guys my audio settings for my PC and also for my headset within the Razer Synapse. Okay, so personally, I have a Razer Black Shark V2 Pro. These are honestly one of my favorite headsets that I've ever used. I'm not really looking to change headset either, as I really do enjoy these for the audio that they provide, and I truly do love these headphones. But I have the levels of volume on max as I want to be able to hear everything and as loud as it can be, and I can just change it manually depending on what it is that is maybe too loud or too quiet. For enhancements, I don't like any of this being enabled. I'm not a huge fan of bass boost or virtual sound or room. I'm not a huge fan of any of this. I hate the way that most of these sound, so I just have them simply disabled, and I'm just not one who loves of those. Advanced, this doesn't really matter, nor does spiral sound. I don't use either of those. It's just a personal preference. Um, and so now for my Razer settings for the actual headset itself. Okay, and so for my Black Sharks, I have literally every EQ on the max decibel as possible, which is +5. It just makes everything slightly louder, from footsteps to gunshots to whatever it may be. It just makes everything slightly more loud, which I just prefer out of my headset. It just is a preference by me to be able to hear everything, as there are very tiny sounds which you normally wouldn't be able to hear, but having your headset a little bit louder definitely does help. I don't use any sort of enhancement. This is also like mainly for microphone, but all of the main settings for my headset are just between these. Okay, and that should conclude for all of my settings for Delta Force in 2025, moving into 2026. This would be my settings for Season 7. And I really hope that you guys did enjoy this video. If there are any settings that maybe I missed or maybe a question that you have regarding the settings, please do let me know down in the comments and I'll happily respond to them. I've tried to explain like most settings like as much as I can, but if there's maybe anything that I missed that you maybe were curious about or even are like, why didn't he cover it? Please do let me know down in the comments. I read all of the comments, so if you leave me anything, I'll probably see it and I'll probably respond. But again, thank you for watching today's video. I hope you guys have a good day.